Now on there, well, in the last few moments, China has announced that they are, in return, going to bring in Chinese tariffs on US goods at the rate of 84%, and that will come into effect from April the 10th. That has come in just the last few moments. It's come from the Chinese Finance Ministry. They've told the World Trade Organization that the US's decision to impose reciprocal tariffs on Beijing threatens to further destabilise global trade. They say the situation has dangerously escalated as one of the affected members, China, expresses grave concerns and firm opposition to this reckless move, but they have, in return, announced that they are then therefore going to increase their tariffs on America. Let's talk to our business presenter, Darren McCaffrey. So I would say a tit-for-tat trade war, but, you know, 84% versus 124%. It's not tit and it's not tat, is it?
No, but it is a proper full-blown trade war, and it is a sign that China is not prepared to cede any ground on all of this. I mean, ultimately, they have taken quite a bullish decision on this. They have suggested that they are willing to take the United States on when it comes to this trade war, and this is a further sign of what we are seeing here with those extra tariffs of 84% on US goods. All I would say is it is what people have warned about, is that when you start a trade war, when both sides decide to take an entrenched position, trying to roll back from that becomes incredibly difficult, Jane. And that is what we're seeing here with China, who, unlike other countries, it must be said, most notably Britain, and to a lesser degree the European Union, who've been far more conciliatory towards the United States, and other large economies who've suggested that they do want to talk to Donald Trump to get rid of these tariffs, China has taken a very, very different approach. Now, they are both each other's biggest trading partners, so this does matter to the United States. Of course, China is the world's second largest economy. From China's point of view, what they will suggest is that of their GDP, actually the United States trade with the US only makes up 2% of their overall GDP. And to that degree, if you like, China says that they can deal with this, with these tariffs, with this trade war. But as I say, they have decided that they are not going to back down. And it'll be interesting to see what the reaction, of course, from the White House will be to this. But you can see a situation where essentially this spirals slightly out of control.
Darren, how might it affect us here in the UK?
Well, it must be said, initially, at least in the short term, there could be some benefits to us here in the UK because, of course, China is a huge manufacturer, Jane, of goods that it sells all over the world. And if the United States is effectively closed off, which with enormous tariffs it is, those goods will need to go elsewhere, and they may be slightly cheaper. So in the short term, what you could see is actually a lot of goods from China, indeed elsewhere, coming into the UK marketplace that you and I may be able to buy at a slightly lower price. I think in the medium to long term, there will be concern about that, though, because clearly that has the possibility of undercutting manufacturers here in Britain, something that British business would not want, because it could force them to cut prices, and that wouldn't be good either. So, yes, it will have an impact. Again, we're not directly involved in this, but ultimately the reverberations will be big for trade and, second of all, for global growth. And that's the other big concern for the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, is that this could lead to a recession globally. That will drag the UK down too. We're a very open, exposed economy, if you like. And that is not good news for the government, a government that says that it is predicated on bringing about economic growth. It will be largely out of the government's control, but Britain will get caught up in that. And it means lower economic growth here in the UK, even the possibility that we may well tip into recession at some point.
And Darren, as we've been talking, the China's Commerce Ministry have announced that they've added 12 US entities to their export control list and also 6 US entities to their unreliable entity lists. What does this mean? These are presumably companies that they're no longer going to trade with?
Yeah, precisely. And we've seen suggestions from China that those lists will only get larger, that effectively they may well end up banning a whole, effectively, sectors of commerce with the United States. There's been talk over the last couple of days about China, for example, banning all poultry imports from the United States. That would have a big impact, of course, on US farmers. They are very concerned about these tariffs with China, and we've heard from even some Republican congressmen and women in the last couple of days expressing their concern about the impact that it could have on their voters, particularly in those states that have got farming, but even suggestions also that, for example, China could ban Hollywood films for being shown on mainland China, a country of well over a billion people. So this is already quite wide-ranging and could, as I say, as both sides get entrenched, particularly if there's a further reaction from the White House, could get wider and deeper and could, or has already done, drag the two largest economies in the world into a trade war.